The sky hung low, heavy with snow that had not yet fallen. Frost clung to every dead stalk, every fence post, every breath drawn. A hawk traced circles in the leaden clouds overhead, the only motion in a land turned brittle and silent. A wind moved across the high plain like a whisper through bone, cold, dry, unmerciful. Cole Danner rode with his head down and collar up, one gloved hand clenched around the reins, the other resting near the worn grip of his rifle. The gelding beneath him wheezed from the uphill pull, hooves crunching thin ice that masked the dirt trail. They'd been riding since before dawn. There was no town for miles, no people, just empty, snow-bitten prairie and the rough outline of cottonwoods along a frozen creek. He'd come out here chasing strays. The winter storm had driven part of the herd out past the old Anders place, abandoned 2 years now, maybe more. Everyone said the roof caved in and the back shed rotted out. But tracks led there, small ones, not cattle. The horse stopped on its own. Cole looked up. The shed stood hunched against the side of the barn, shadowed, crumpled on one end like a kicked-in tin can. Smoke drifted from somewhere behind it, thin, gray, hesitant. He dismounted slowly, boots crunching stiff frost. There was a sound, not animal, not wind, a scrape. Then, silence. He stepped forward, slow and quiet, stopping just outside the warped door hanging half off its hinges. Something in him hesitated, a pull low in the gut, not fear, not yet. Inside, he saw her. A woman, barely more than a shape in the dim light, crouched in the far corner with both arms braced around a pair of children. Her coat was too thin, her hair wild around her face. One of the kids had his hand clutched in her skirts, eyes wide. The other was buried against her chest. She didn't scream, didn't plead, just stared, breathing hard through her nose like a spooked mare. "I won't hurt you," Cole said. His voice sounded too loud in the cold. No answer. He glanced behind him. Snow had begun to fall, lazy and slow, soft flakes that melted on his shoulders and vanished in his beard. "You got a name?" he asked. Still nothing. The older child shifted and coughed. The sound of it, a dry, raw thing, settled in Cole's chest like a weight. He took off his gloves. Palms up, he stepped just close enough for the warmth of his breath to drift her way. "Ma'am, you can't stay in here, not through tonight." Her lips moved, dry, cracked. "We're not going anywhere. You'll freeze." "I know." It hit him, then. She wasn't defiant. She wasn't even angry. She was past that, worn thin, like old rope. He bent down slowly and laid the gloves on the ground. Then he stepped back. "I got a fire going back at my place, not far, just over the ridge." The boy peered up, eyes red and rimmed with dust. "I can bring blankets, food." The woman blinked. A slow, pained blink, like someone trying to stay upright. "You got a name?" Cole asked again, quieter now. She looked at him, and for the first time, really saw him. "Etta." He nodded once. "All right, Etta. I'm gonna ride back. Bring some things. You stay put. Don't open that door to nobody else, just me." She didn't answer, but she didn't argue either. As he turned and mounted, snow thickened around him. The shed behind him shrank in the white, barely more than a smudge against the land. He rode faster now. Through the wind, through the ghosts, and when he returned an hour later, she was still there. Still watching the door. Still holding her children like the last warm thing left on earth. The storm deepened as dusk fell, dragging the wind into long howls that rolled down the ridge like voices from another world. Cole rode with a sack of provisions strapped behind him, a thick wool blanket under one arm and a lantern swinging from his saddle horn. The snow came harder now, smothering the horizon, blurring earth and sky. When he reached the shed again, he dismounted and knocked once. "It's me." Silence. Then the door creaked open. Etta stood there, jaw set tight, her face pale in the lantern light. She had the younger child on her hip, the older one clinging to her side. Her eyes flicked to the sack, then to him. She didn't thank him, just stepped aside. Inside, the cold was so thick it bit through boots and bone. He set the lantern down, and its glow chased the shadows back to the corners. I brought some things: food, blankets, water. Etta didn't move. He opened the sack and laid out what he'd brought: biscuits, dried venison, apples wrapped in cloth, 2 canteens, a flask of coffee. The boy's eyes locked onto the food. "Go on," Cole said gently. "Let him eat." Still, Etta hesitated. "Poison and you ain't my aim." Her shoulders dropped a fraction. She loosened her grip and let the boy shuffle forward. He grabbed a biscuit in both hands, then looked back at his mother, waiting for a nod. She gave it. The girl was quieter. Her breath rattled against her mother's chest. "She sick?" Cole asked. "Been coughin'. Started 2 days ago." "Got any kindling?" She shook her head. He glanced around the shed walls, sagging with mold, one corner open to the wind. He stepped outside without a word, pried loose a few broken boards from the side of the barn, and came back in with his arms full. Within minutes, he had a fire coaxed to life in a ring of old stones. The warmth spread slowly, reluctantly, but it spread. Etta lowered herself beside it and wrapped both children in the blanket he'd brought. They huddled together, limbs tangled, silent, except for the girl's soft cough and the hiss of melting snow. Cole sat near the door, his rifle across his knees, watching the wind warp the flames. He didn't ask where they came from. Not yet. When she finally spoke, her voice was low and even. "You're the first soul we seen in 3 days. You walk far?" "From Graythorn. That's 2 ridges west." She nodded. "We left quick." Cole didn't press. He knew the look in her eyes. Something chased her out. And it wasn't just poverty. The boy had finished eating and was dozing now. The girl clung tighter to her mother, cheeks flushed, lips dry. Cole shifted, leaned closer to the fire. "She's gonna need a bed, real heat." "I know. My place is still open. Got a spare room." Etta met his eyes. "Why would you help us?" Cole was quiet a moment. "Storm like this, no one ought to die in it. You don't know what we been through." "Maybe not." He looked at her, steady. "But I can see you're still standin'. That counts for something." She didn't cry, didn't crumble, just looked down at the fire and pulled her daughter in tighter. Cole stood. "I'll come back at first light with the wagon. You don't want to come, I'll leave it at that." She didn't answer. He opened the door. Snow blew in like a scream. He stepped out and closed it behind him. Back on his horse, riding through a world turned white and strange, Cole felt something shift in his chest. Not pity, not charity. Something slower. Older. Like recognition. If this story stirred something deep within you, subscribe and let the journey continue. The morning came silent, gray, and cold enough to burn the lungs. Snow had packed the sky tight, muffling the world in a hush that felt more like mourning than peace. Cole hitched the mule team to the buckboard before first light, his breath rising in clouds as he tightened the straps with gloved fingers stiff from the night. The storm had eased, but not quit. Flakes still fell, quiet and steady, like the land itself was holding its breath. The road out was half swallowed. He drove by memory, steering the wagon over ridges where the wind had carved the drifts down to ice. By the time the shed came into view, his coat was stiff with frost, and the horse's flanks were steaming. The door opened before he reached it. Etta stood there, wrapped in the blanket he'd left, her children at her side like shadows. The boy held a tin cup in both hands. The girl's lips were blue. "You ready?" Cole asked. She didn't speak, just nodded, eyes full of something unreadable. He hopped down and helped them into the wagon. Etta climbed last, steadying her daughter as she settled onto the hay. The boy sat beside his sister and pulled the blanket over all 3 of them. Cole said nothing. He simply turned the team around and headed back the way he came. The ride was long and slow, the wheels groaning under packed snow, but no one spoke. The only sound was the creak of the wooden frame and the quiet cough of the girl, too tired now even for crying. Cole's cabin sat in a fold of land beneath a rise, tucked between cottonwoods stripped bare by winter. Smoke rose from the chimney, thin and dark. When they pulled up, he helped them down without a word, then led them inside. The heat from the fire hit like a wave. He had the stove going strong, the pot already simmering. Blankets were stacked near the hearth, and the spare bed in the corner had been made with fresh linens, stiff and faded from storage. Etta hesitated on the threshold, her fingers twitching near her hip like she'd forgotten what it was to stand in warmth. "It's all right," he said. She moved inside, guiding the children with her. The boy looked around wide-eyed. The girl sagged against her mother's shoulder. "You can take that bed there," Cole said, pointing to the corner. "I'll sleep in the barn if I need to." "You don't have to," she said quickly. He paused. "All right. Then I'll take the chair." She nodded. They settled in slow. Etta laid the girl down first, wrapping her tight, tucking a folded quilt beneath her head. Then, the boy. She hovered over them, touching their faces, brushing hair back, murmuring something too soft to catch. Cole ladled out the stew beans, potatoes, dried meat, hot and thick, set a bowl near her elbow, then stepped back. Etta ate slowly, like it hurt to chew. Her eyes never left her children. "They got names?" he asked. She looked up. "Will's the boy. Little one's Ada. Will's a strong name. He's a strong boy. And you?" "Etta Morrison." She didn't ask for his name. He didn't offer it. They finished eating in silence. Cole added wood to the fire. The wind clawed at the windows, but it couldn't get in. When the children finally slept, Etta sat in the rocker near the flames. She didn't speak, didn't cry, just rocked, slow and steady, staring into the orange light like it might tell her what came next. Cole sat across from her, his elbows on his knees, hands clasped. "Whatever you ran from," he said quietly. "You don't have to say a word until you're ready." She didn't answer. But for the first time, her shoulders dropped, just a little. A thread of trust, barely there, but it held. The next morning broke cold but clear. Sunlight glittered on the snow like broken glass, sharp and white across the frozen fields. Smoke rose straight from the chimney, and inside the cabin, the air was thick with the scent of hot cornmeal and fresh wood smoke. Etta stood at the stove, sleeves rolled up, stirring with a quiet focus that did not invite questions. Her hair was pulled back now, revealing the sharp line of her jaw, the hollowness in her cheeks. There was strength in her posture, though lean, unbending. The children sat wrapped in quilts near the hearth, dozing in and out, the girl's cough weaker now, the boy chewing slowly on a heel of bread. Cole watched from the table, coffee cooling in his hand. "You cook like someone used to feeding more mouths than her own," he said finally. Etta didn't look up. "I was the oldest of 6. Learned early." He nodded, sipping the bitter brew. "That where you're from? Graythorn?" "Originally from south of there. Married young. Lived on a tenant plot near Lark Creek. And now?" Her hand slowed in the pot. "He's gone." Cole didn't press. She dished him a bowl without being asked, then filled one for herself. They ate at the table, both listening to the quiet rasp of the fire and the soft breath of sleeping children. Outside, a hawk screeched once sharp and sudden, then silence again. "You been alone long?" she asked. "Couple years, since my brother passed, left me the land. No wife. No time. No patience either, maybe." She gave a small, dry sound, not quite a laugh, more like the memory of one. He watched her a moment. "You're not afraid anymore." Etta set down her spoon. "I still am, just not of you." He nodded once. That was more than he expected. Later that day, Etta helped him haul water from the pump. Her boots sank deep in the snow, skirts soaked along the hem. Her hands were raw from cold, but she didn't complain. They worked in silence, no talk of what had come before, no promises, just the creak of the rope and the splash of the bucket. Will trailed behind, dragging a stick in the snow, eyes darting between the trees. "You got family anywhere?" Cole asked as they loaded the barrels onto the sled. "None that'd take us in." He didn't ask why. She didn't offer. Back in the cabin, As dusk fell and the children drifted to sleep again, Cole laid out the seed catalogs by the lamp and opened a ledger. Etta glanced over. "You plantin' come spring?" He nodded. "Barley, mostly, maybe oats." "You do it alone?" "I manage." She looked back at the fire. "I can work. I ain't afraid to sweat." "I figured as much." A pause. "And I don't aim to take charity." He met her eyes. Didn't offer any. The space between them settled into something quiet but steady, like the air just before the thaw. Not warmth, not yet, but a change. The days passed slow, stitched together by routine and frost. Etta took to the work without question. Each morning, before the sun cleared the ridge, she was up splitting, kindling, or scrubbing the stovetop, her breath rising in clouds in the cold corners of the cabin. She learned to milk the goats, patch the coop door, mend fence wire with fingers still red from the cold. When Cole offered to do the harder tasks, she refused with a tight nod and a firmer grip on the hammer. "You let me be useful," she said once, voice flat. "That's the deal." He didn't argue. By the end of the week, the girl's cough had faded to an occasional rasp. Her cheeks had color now. Will, stronger by the day, trailed Cole around the yard like a shadow, asking quiet questions and soaking in every answer. Etta watched from the porch sometimes, her arms crossed tight against the wind, eyes tracking her son's small figure as he learned to hold a rope or check for fox prints. In the evenings, after supper and chores, the four of them sat around the fire. The children dozed. Cole whittled. Etta mended socks or peeled potatoes, her hands never idle. One night, as the wind howled like an old wound outside, Cole glanced across the hearth. What was he like? Their father. Etta looked down at her stitching. Her fingers paused. "He was kind when we were young. Too kind, maybe. Changed?" "No. Life did. He got to drinkin', then to hurtin'. I left after the last beating when Ada couldn't cry right for a week." Cole didn't speak. He just set the knife down and waited. "I ran straight into a cold snap. Thought I could make it to my cousin's place in Westfield. Never got that far." Her voice was quiet, not ashamed, just tired. "I don't know what I was thinking, but I knew if I stayed, he'd put one of us in the ground." Cole reached for another piece of wood, feeding it to the flames. "You thought right," he said. Etta didn't answer, but her shoulders lowered, just a little, as if the weight she carried had shifted, moved closer to someone who could help hold it. That night, she stayed up after the children had fallen asleep. Cole, too, sat longer by the fire. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. It was enough to be warm, alive, and breathing the same quiet air. In the barn the next day, while mending a busted latch, Cole noticed Will standing by the stall gate, hands behind his back. "You got something to say, son?" Will hesitated, then stepped forward. "Mama says I ask too many questions." Cole grinned, a slow, rare thing. "She's probably right, but ask anyway." Will looked up. "Why'd you help us?" Cole wiped his hands on his trousers, thought about it a moment. "'Cause I've seen what winter does to folks. I didn't want to find 3 bodies in a frozen shed come thaw." Will looked down, nodded, then said, "You're the first man who ever talked nice to her." The words hit like a nail straight to the chest. Cole turned back to the latch, but his hands moved slower now. That night, he brought in an old wooden box from the attic. Inside were pieces of his mother's china, a carved spoon, a faded photograph. He set them on the table without explanation. Etta looked at him, puzzled. "They're yours, if you want 'em," he said. "This house could use more signs of life." She touched the rim of one of the cups, tracing the crack with her thumb. "I used to set a table every Sunday, no matter what," she said. "Even if there was nothing to eat but beans." "Do it again," he said. "I'll see to it there's more than beans." Something flickered behind her eyes. Not trust exactly, but it's beginning. The thaw came early that year, not all at once, but in slow, muddy patches that broke through the snow like wounds healing from the inside out. The wind softened. Birds returned. Water dripped from the eaves in steady rhythms, as if the house had learned to breathe again. Etta planted onions by hand in the garden bed beside the shed, her knees caked in damp earth. She didn't speak as she worked. She didn't need to. Her hands moved with purpose, planting each bulb like it meant something, like roots were a kind of promise. Cole watched from the porch for a while before stepping down and joining her. He crouched beside her in the mud, the sleeves of his shirt rolled to the elbows. "You always work this hard." She smirked without looking up. "Only when I'm allowed to stay." He didn't laugh, but something passed between them anyway. Will helped too, carrying buckets of water from the pump with a determination that made Cole's throat tighten. Ada, quieter than her brother but twice as stubborn, followed her mother's steps through the rows, patting the soil flat behind her with small, careful hands. Inside, the cabin began to change. Etta found her own rhythm, her own ways. A curtain went up over the sink window. The broom leaned in a new corner. Her stitching appeared on the quilt that covered the children's bed. And then, one evening, Cole came in from the barn and found her at the table with her sleeves rolled and a letter open before her. "From someone back east?" he asked. She shook her head. "From the circuit judge." He stood there, heart stilled. Etta looked up at him, her eyes unreadable. "He's filed for custody. My husband says I kidnapped them." Cole felt the old cold creep back in through the walls. "You told anyone where you were?" "No." "Then how?" "He always had a way of finding things out." Her voice was steady. "He's got money now, married into it. I guess he wants the children back to look respectable." Cole moved closer, slow. "He won't take them. You can't promise that." "I can do what needs doing." She stood then, and for the first time since she'd come through his door, she looked small, not weak, not fragile, just worn thin by the weight of too many years. "If I lose them," she said, "I won't survive it." Cole crossed the room and took the letter from her hands. "You won't lose them," he said, voice low. "We fight, together." And that night, long after the children were asleep, they talked through the options. The law, the risks, the cost. Cole brought out the deed to the land, the papers for the homestead. "I can file to make you part owner," he said. "If we marry?" Her breath caught. "I'm not askin' for the sake of appearances," he said, quiet. "I'm askin' because I want you here. Not just now. For good." Etta stared at him, hands folded in her lap. "I was someone's property once," she said. "I won't be again." He reached for her hand, held it gently. "Then be my equal. Build this life with me. No one owns you here." The fire popped. The wind shifted outside, warm now, full of spring. She didn't speak. Not right away. But her fingers curled around his, and she didn't let go. The wedding was quiet, just the four of them and the wind in the cottonwoods. They stood beneath the bare branches behind the cabin, the earth still soft with thaw and scattered with early shoots of green. Cole wore his best shirt, freshly scrubbed and missing only one button. Etta wore a simple dress he hadn't seen before, blue-gray like the sky before rain. Will held Ada's hand, his hair combed flat and his face solemn. The preacher from Westfield read the vows without fanfare, his boots sunk half an inch in the mud. When it was done, Etta didn't cry. She just looked up at Cole, her eyes steady and clear, and said, "I'll stay. Not out of need, but because I want to." He nodded once, jaw tight. That was enough. They didn't celebrate. There was no cake, no music. But Cole built a new table out of oak from the ridge, and Etta placed the china on it that night, one piece for each of them. Ada sat in her lap. Will sat tall in his own chair, proud and watchful. Later, when the children slept, they stood on the porch and watched the dark roll in across the prairie. "You sure you're ready for what might come?" she asked. Cole leaned on the rail. "No." She turned to him. "But I'd rather face it with you than live a quiet life without you," he added. The court summons came 2 weeks later, carried by a gray-suited man with polished boots and eyes that didn't belong to this country. He handed the letter over with a stiff nod, then turned back toward his carriage without looking once at the house. Etta, read it in silence. April 14th, she said. Cole took the paper from her, glanced over it. That's 3 weeks. He saw her jaw set. That familiar steel. I won't let him near them, she said. You won't have to. The next days passed like a storm before the storm. They gathered documents, letters from neighbors who'd seen the bruises, statements from the doctor in Graythorne who had treated Will's arm the year before. Cole wrote to the judge himself, explaining the marriage, the land, the new life. Etta stood before the mirror each night, practicing what she would say if she had to. Her voice was strong, but each time she finished, her hands trembled. Let me speak, Cole told her, on the 3rd night. You weren't there, she said. I was there the moment you walked out. That's the part that matters now. The night before the hearing, Etta went to the children's bed and knelt beside them. She kissed Ada's forehead, brushed Will's hair back. Then she sat in the rocker, staring at the fire until the sun began to rise. In the courthouse, her husband looked smaller than she remembered, dressed sharp but not clean. Something in his face had spoiled, the charm had worn thin. He tried to speak first, said she was unfit, unstable, a threat, said she'd run off in the night with his children and denied him his rights. Cole stood then. His voice wasn't loud, but it didn't need to be. He spoke of the shed, the storm, the sickness. He spoke of Etta's strength, of the home she'd helped build, of the safety her children now knew. When the judge asked Etta if she had anything to add, she looked at her husband, her old life, and then at Cole. I ran, she said, because no one else was going to save us, and I stayed because I found a place where I didn't have to be saved, where we could stand on our own. The judge was silent a long time. When the ruling came, it was clear. Custody denied, case closed. They walked out into the sun, hand in hand. Cole squeezed once, firm and sure. Etta didn't smile, but her eyes filled with something close to peace. They had made it, not back to what was, but forward to what could be. That spring, the land woke up slow and stubborn, like a man pulling himself from grief. The snow melted in veins across the fields, feeding the creek until it ran fat and brown with silt. Trees budded late. Wildflowers bloomed low, close to the earth, as if afraid to hope too early. Etta planted carrots by the edge of the porch, knees in the soil, hair loose and streaked with sun. She didn't hum or speak, just worked with quiet purpose, pressing each seed down like a vow. Ada toddled nearby, dragging a tin pail through the mud, her laughter sudden and light, full of things she hadn't yet learned to fear. Will had taken to the barn like he'd been born in it. He knew the name of every chicken, every post in the fence line. Cole watched him from the shade of the eaves, arms crossed, mouth tight with a pride he didn't say aloud. In the evenings, the family sat together on the porch. Sometimes Etta read from one of the old books she'd unpacked from the attic trunk, a weathered Bible, a dime novel, a farmer's almanac with notes scribbled in the margins. Cole listened with his head tilted back, the brim of his hat low, watching the light fade behind her voice. They didn't talk about the court hearing, or the man who'd tried to take what he never cared to keep. What mattered was here now, in the rows of barley pushing up like soldiers, in the way Etta laughed sometimes, short and surprised, like it had caught her off guard, in the new quilt on the bed, stitched from old clothes and lined with soft wool. One night, late, Cole woke to the sound of the wind rattling the shutters. Etta was already sitting up, her back straight, breath shallow. "Bad dream?" he asked. She didn't answer right away. Then, "I dreamed I was back in that shed, only it was colder this time, and you never came." He sat up and pulled the blanket around her shoulders. "I came. I know." She leaned into him then, slow and careful, like someone still learning what safety felt like. "I don't dream about him anymore," she said. "That's good. I dream about the road though, about being lost, about walking, and not knowing if there's anything waiting at the end." Cole kissed her hair, the part where the gray was just beginning to show. "There's something waiting," he said. "You found it." The next morning, she put her name beside his on the deed, signed it slow, with her full hand, as if claiming something more than land. By summer, the house had changed again. A swing hung from the cottonwood out back. Will had a pup of his own, half coyote by the look of it. Ada had taken to shouting, "Papa," every time Cole stepped through the door. Etta caught herself the first time she smiled at that. She didn't stop it the second time. And when the barley came in tall and gold, and Cole stood in the middle of the field with sweat on his brow and dirt on his hands, he looked toward the porch and saw her there, not waiting, but watching, not needing him, just choosing him. That made all the difference. If you've ever stood at the edge of despair, subscribe and see how the road bends toward light.